Hey, this is Cannabis Rocky from the Budtenders podcast. I am on Dro TV. Did you hear that? I am on Dro TV. I cannot believe it. This is a really great experience that I get to have. And I get to tell people about the first time I smoked. What? One of the best things ever. And check it out. Do subscribe, man. I did that. It was a wonderful thing. I highly recommend it.
Welcome to My First Time, the show about your first time getting high on marijuana. I'm your host, Mike Freeman with Dro TV. Today, I'd like to welcome our guest, Rocky Hernandez. How are you?
Hey, how you doing, everybody? It's good to be on this show. I'm very, very excited.
Well, thanks for giving us some time today and coming on Dro TV. You can find more of Rocky on Instagram at Cannabis Rocky, as well as the Budtenders podcast. We'll have all the links in the description below. So, Rocky, thanks again for coming on the show. Let everybody know where you're located and a little bit about what you provide to the cannabis world.
Absolutely. So I'm actually in Las Vegas at current. What I do is I do work for a dispensary. So I am actually in the cannabis industry for work. And on my free time, I do have a really great podcast that's really geared towards educating bud tenders on the brands that are out there in the industry. Just because we know that there's a gap in that education a little bit. We can't try everything, and a lot of brands can't afford to pay for a lot of the marketing right off the gate because they've already paid for many things just to get into the industry. So we like to educate the bud tenders on those types of things.
Awesome. And there's a huge need for education as more people are exposed to this plant, whether it's through legalization or medicinal. It seems education is the biggest thing, bringing people around to using as well as destigmatizing. So we're thankful there's knowledgeable people like you out there educating. So that's awesome. And I definitely want to get more into the podcast. But the show is my first time, Rocky. So please
Yes.
indulge us in the first time that you got stoned.
Okay. So I was I'm going to go back to the 90s.
Okay.
I was in high school, is the end of my high school career. As a matter of fact, it was the very last day of school.
Okay.
And I was graduating in a couple of days. There was that lapse between your last day and the graduation day. So
Sure.
I had a couple of days before that, and a family member who was going to Hawaii said, hey, I picked up some really great Acapulco Gold. Do you want to smoke? She picked me up from school, and I was like, I've never smoked cannabis. But you never want to admit, because you're too cool for school, that you
Sure.
don't smoke cannabis. So I was like, okay. And here she is, probably now at this point, about 15, 20 years smoking cannabis. And I am new, fresh lungs. So we ended up smoking, and she's like, hey, I'm going to go to Target. And Target had just first opened in Chicago. I was living in Chicago at the time. And I was like, yeah, let's head over to Target. Well, it hadn't hit me yet. I hadn't had that 10-minute lapse in time. So at first I'm like, oh, this is really, really cool. Fantastic. Smoking Acapulco Gold is like a sativa, right? So as soon as we got to Target, that sucker kicked in. And
Nice.
can I tell you, I was like trying my best to retain and keep my composure, but I was slowly losing it inside of Target. So we get inside, and I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? And here's the thing. Um, Initially, when you smoke cannabis, it's a change in the way you feel. That A type feeling starts kicking in, and you're like, I can't control this. So now the anxiety started kicking in. And I'm like, oh no, what's going on with me? Make this stop. How long is this going to last? I had all kinds of questions going on in my mind. So I found one rack of coats I was standing by because nobody was standing in that area. I didn't want anybody noticing that I was high. So I stood by this rack and I held on to it. And no sooner, maybe about 10, 15 minutes. I feel like I was standing there for an eternity, but it had to be like 10, 15 minutes. And I hear over the PA, Rocky Hernandez to customer service. And I'm like, oh no, they know I'm smoking cannabis. Well, what it was that my cousin had no idea where I was at, and I was trying to hide from people so I could completely understand why she had no idea where I was at.
Sure.
Yep. So I ended up dragging my carcass to customer service, and my cousin was there, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No, no, I'm not." And she's like, "You've never smoked cannabis before, huh?" And I said, "No." And she's like, "Why did you say that you smoke cannabis?" I was like, "Because I didn't want to seem like a weirdo. Like I'm the only one that hasn't smoked cannabis yet." And she was like, "Let's get out of here because I'm sure you're going through a thing or two." So we ended up leaving, and she was like, "Take my word for it. I'm going to get you something really nice and greasy to eat." But I personally was not about that life initially. And I'm like, "Oh my God, why do people want to do this?"
Right, right.
You know? And no sooner than I would say about an hour later, that high actually felt very good.
Okay.
It felt, yeah, because I eased into it. Right now, I'm with her. She's making me feel more comfortable. And so, ergo, the story, man, literally, I must have hung on to that rack for, I want to say it was 15, 20 minutes, but it was probably longer than that. Uh, but really, I'll never forget that first time because I mean, Target, my cousin, it's like, what is the best, one of the best moments and one of the worst moments?
Yeah, yeah. So your cousin was a seasoned vet, let's say.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, very.
so was she trying to play it cool at customer service, or did she not care? And she was like, yeah, let's go, stoner.
No, she's a loudmouth Puerto Rican, so she
Okay.
doesn't care. Girl, you high? And it's like, "Shh, yes, for sure."
That's great.
Yeah, it was a tremendous time. What was nice is that she was a smoker, thank goodness.
Sure.
So she kind of led me, hey, this is not going to last very long. You'll have it for a little bit, but it'll go away. And she did remind me, which is something that I continually tell people all the time, is cannabis never killed nobody.
Right.
So that made me, believe it or not, that made me feel much more at ease than any other thing that anybody could have told me at that particular moment in time.
Right. Yeah. And she was able to make sure it wasn't a negative experience, kind of bring you back to maybe not reality because you were stoned for the first time, but you weren't afraid of Target customer service. I guess we'll say that.
Right. At first, everybody was public enemy number one. They were all going
Yeah.
to get me.
Yeah.
I was going to jail for the first time I've ever smoked cannabis. So, yeah, initially, the reaction is, "Oh my God, everybody can tell." And she's like, "Nobody could tell anything. You just look like a weirdo holding on to a rack for 30 minutes."
Right.
But facts,
Uh,
that was really
yeah.
my first time. Yep. I
So,
ended up passing out on my mom's couch. She dropped me off after we ate, and then I ended up passing out on my mom's couch until the next day.
mom didn't suspect anything.
Nope.
Good. Hey,
Nope. I was a good kid.
good. Hey. Last day of school, right? So you were like graduating. She must have been, excited that you're moving on. So yeah, she probably didn't suspect anything.
No, I was a straight A student too.
Okay.
So she was probably like, "Hey, I was back at
Yeah,
an
she's
early
tired.
hour." Yeah, she's tired. She's gonna
Yeah.
take a little nap in her entire. Oh, and I went to an all girls high school, and we
Okay.
had these crazy uniforms, right? The knee high socks, the little skirts and shit. I fell asleep in that whole gig.
Nice. Nice. Hey, everybody, I want to quickly mention Food Forest Abundance. Food Forest Abundance is a great way to create your own self sustaining food forest and naturally occurring ecosystem that's commonly found in nature, but designed specifically for you. Through multiple layers of trees, shrubs, herbs, vines, rhizomes, mushrooms, and perennial vegetables, you can become your own supply chain without the typical maintenance required of a garden. From small spaces to large areas, both urban and suburban, Food Forest Abundance wants us to get back to our roots in nature by engaging with our food production in a meaningful way. For more information, click on the link in the description below and start your journey today. Okay, let's get back to today's episode. Yeah, who has time to take that off when you're stoned and tired?
What I'm
So Rocky,
saying.
like most people who have an experience the first time where they're not sure if they when they want to experience that for a second time, when did you accept marijuana as uh medicine, and when did you get into the cannabis space?
I waited about, I want to say a few months after I smoked again from that first experience. I was still a little scared, a little green.
Okay.
And it was another family member, another cousin of mine, an older cousin, and we ended up going to the movies, and she's like, "Do you want to smoke?" And I was like, "Yeah." So we ended up smoking, but this time I guess this is where I started realizing that different strains do different things, because this smoke was really like relaxing and chill. And I immediately had the munchies like 20 minutes later. So I would assume that this strain that she had was an indica.
Right.
Now that I know better, but I ended up smoking with her. And then I realized that I have ADHD and a lot of anxiety, so I overthink things quite a bit. And I noticed that when I smoked with my cousin, all that calmed down, all of that extra activity upstairs, um, any kind of fear or anxiety that I would normally have kind of calmed down quite a bit. And at the time, my doctor was trying to put me on Ritalin, and I had already tried that process, and no. And then I think shortly after that, there was another drug that they wanted to give me as well. And I did not like the feelings after I took those pills, so I just didn't want to take them. And I didn't want to start a process where you take something and you get off, and you take it and you get off.
Right.
So in order to avoid that, I was like, man, this has got to be a solution. So I was introduced to a gentleman, and he ended up being my dealer for about 18 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
Right.
so I stick with the same one, and he helped me out. Like anytime I would be like, I like what you gave me that was more relaxing, he'd be like, I know exactly what you're talking about. And he would just kind of curtail it, even though at the time nobody really knew the strains, even if they mentioned them, I wouldn't really know the background education on it or anything.
Right.
Yeah. So
And so now you have your High Budtenders podcast, you're educating. Um, Fast forward to you in a position where you're a three-time Las Vegas Cannabis Award nominee, Bud Tender Award winner. Um, Talk us through what got you into wanting to educate, and how you kind of rose up through the ranks, shall we say.
absolutely. So I started working for a small dispensary, and I was there for a few months. I had a vast retail experience. So I had about 15 years of retail management as area sales manager for AT&T. So I was doing pretty well. And I kind of wanted to be in the cannabis industry because I wanted my work to have some purpose to it. So I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to educate people on the experiences that I had, because I knew that it can help people. To what capacity, I learned, but before I had no real solid knowledge of how much this plant can benefit people.
Right.
So when I ended up coming to Vegas, I decided, hey, you know what? It's was legal, and it was medically legal at the time. And I was like, hey, I'm going to try to get in this cannabis industry in hopes that I can help educate people and, teach people about my experience, and hopefully, it'll help to educate them, and or maybe help them with any experience that they have that's similar. So I ended up applying and getting like an entry level position because at the time you had to have cannabis knowledge or experience, and not too many people had that. So they started me off at the very bottom. And so I was trimming initially for cultivation. And then I just kept asking them whenever retail positions come up, let me know. So a bud tending position came up and I ended up taking it. And I was with them for a few months. Ended up applying for Planet 13 because who doesn't want to work for the large one, what was going to be the largest dispensary in Vegas? So I ended up taking up that opportunity. They called me for an interview and asked me if I wanted to be a bud tender. I ended up working there. Fast forward, the Bud Tender Awards came around, and I really gave excellent. I mean, I had so much retail knowledge that I was literally killing it as a bud tender
Nice.
because the care was there, right? The customer service. And then I was learning everything I possibly could. Any education that came, I was going to learn it. I was going to delve, right into it and learn it and make sure that I can regurgitate that, you know what I mean, at some point in my
Sure.
career. So I ended up getting nominated for a Bud Tender Award. And at first I thought it was a joke, so I never responded to it. But then I found out it was a real thing. So I was like, yeah, let me put my best foot forward on this situation. So I ended up doing all the things, that they needed. I was on social media. I was trying to, join different non-for-profits that kind of combined cannabis with their, background. So I was like, I want to do all the things. And I ended up winning that Bud Tender Award. It was a medallion award for community service. And that ended up taking me from there. Literally, I was like the owner of Planet was right. It was in Forbes magazine and he was in GQ magazine. And he always mentioned the Bud Tender Award winner.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, man, I really need to elevate my own image and try some way to find out how I can, you know what I mean? Like make this work for me and maybe people will listen to the things that I have to say on a larger scale. And I was one day, one of the bud tenders that worked with me named Jarrell asked me if I would be interested in podcast, being on his podcast. And I was like, absolutely. The next day, I all night I thought about it. And the next day I was like, hey, would you ever be interested in having a partner on there, maybe a co-host to the podcast? If you were open to that, I would love that. And he was like, are you serious? And I was like, yeah. And he goes, heck yeah, I would love that. And so we ended up starting the podcast knowing zero about podcasting besides the fact that I listen to podcasts all the time.
Right.
Yeah. And so I found it a way to educate people. The overhead is low on a podcast, right?
Sure.
And you can find different avenues and ways to make money without having to charge a guest or, just provide that education for the bud tender for free so that they can listen. Hey, I've never tried this strain or I've never tried this brand, but they carry it at my dispensary. So now they got a little bit of knowledge, and then we always speak about cannabinoids on, the entourage effect. We have people on that are experts in the field of, in different fields of cannabis. And I think it's phenomenal. It's been a great thing for us. And now we're coming up to, I do believe we're almost a little over 150 episodes.
Wow.
So I'm super excited about the growth and the opportunities, more than the growth, the opportunities that we've had to educate and learn, because I've been able to learn a lot through that process.
Excellent. How many years have you been doing the podcast? For how long?
We've been doing it for 2 years.
Okay.
In the spring, it'll be 3.
Awesome.
So yeah,
That's
yeah, I
great.
really enjoy it.
Yeah. Like most people who want to start a podcast, you just have to start. It it the first one might suck, not sound as good as 150. Um, but it's easy to get started. It's not easy to put out a quality show,
That's
But,
right.
you know, anyone out there listening or watching, if it's something you want to do, just start. Um, I've had other podcasts and you record the first episode, you see what it sounds like. If you like it or not, send it to somebody, get some feedback. You can always scrap it and start or do something different. But um, that's awesome. So you guys bring guests on, experts, um, any upcoming guests or recent guests you want to plug, something we should go check out?
Absolutely. We had on one of JT Campos. He was on the television show Queen of the South, and I
Okay,
was a big fan there. But what's nice is to see how many people that are famous wanting to get into the industry because they have a backstory. It's not just always money fueled and money related. And
sure,
that kind of gave me more of an insight of like, hey, cannabis could be for everybody, and it's not just a money push. You know what I'm saying? Like if you listen to his podcast, it's basically, hey, I have this platform and now I've got a bigger voice and I can help people on a bigger scale as opposed to, hey, this is going to be a really great money maker, can't wait. You know what I mean?
sure.
So um he was educational, it was spiritual, it was a spiritual uh podcast, and what he brings to the industry is very, very interesting. So he's still sticking with the CBD, which I think is phenomenal, because in the end, once this becomes federally legal, I believe CBD will win the race. It's just super medicinal. So in that capacity, it was really great to have him on, and I highly recommend that people check out that particular podcast. uh, I know that you're what you were saying, and I wanted to piggyback on, it is not easy. I know it's easy to start, and he was right. It's not easy to get sound right and to actually do all of the production part of podcasts. So but if you do start, stick with it. Don't allow those first, because if you listen to my first episode, it's about an hour and 45 minutes. And we all know now, we know that the attention span for people is about 30.
Yeah,
So our episodes, thank you for bringing that up too as well. Now those episodes are 30 minutes because it's a little bit easier for people. And plus their commutes from work to here, you got to keep that in
sure.
mind too. People are not on most time people are not on an hour and 45-minute drive to work.
Right.
And you want to kind of capture those people just going here and there, or if they have a few minutes to themselves, or you know what I mean, especially if you have kids. It's just a nice thing to start, and to have. And yeah, keep it concise, but keep with it. Don't give up. I always tell people, that first year is a hump, but once you get over it, it's smooth sailing.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I have a record label. I've been a DJ since I was like 15 years old. So I was doing a podcast for the label and I've kind of let it go a little bit just because I'm trying to focus more on cannabis. But that gave me the ability to figure out, okay, I need to tweak this. I need proper lighting. I got a different setup now. Um, so yeah, definitely stick with it because I wouldn't have started this if I hadn't done the other one. Um, and Awesome. Awesome stuff. So you flour, concentrate, edibles. What's your go-to?
My go-to is flour.
Okay.
I'm a heavy joint smoker, so I'm old school
Nice.
in that
Okay.
capacity. A joint, usually a joint to start the day, and then a couple to end the day is usually where I'm at. If it's my day off, I smoke all the way through the day. Um, that's yeah, but flour is usually my preferred choice of consumption.
Nice. What you smoking on there?
This is actually, I'm in my home right now doing this podcast because my studio needs a little bit of cleanup. We just recorded, so I ended up coming in. So when I do smoke inside the house, it has to be like a vape or something that doesn't leave like an odor my wife doesn't smoke. But this is rosin vape pen, and I got this one from a friend of mine that what won one of the Budtender awards, as a matter of fact.
Nice.
So she ended up giving me this really great rosin pen, and it's phenomenal. It's Where's My Bike, I do believe, is the name of the strain.
Okay.
um, and I could tell you, man, she hooked me up on this, and it's just phenomenal. Now people have rosin, and once you start smoking rosin, it's like addicted to rosin. It's
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, sweet. Rocky, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. I love learning about the podcast and your journey from Target to now.
Yeah.
Um,
It's funny because I have to go and pick up an order from Target after we're done with this podcast.
cool. Yeah.
So it just reminds me that.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, great story. It was a pleasure speaking with you again. Let everybody know where they can find more of you, Rocky.
Yes, if you are on social media, I'm on Instagram at Cannabis with a Z, Cannabis Rocky, or you could check us out at High Budtenders. We do have a backup account that's at High Budtenders Podcast, but go ahead and follow that at High Budtenders. And then if you need to send us anything, or if you'd like to learn more about the podcast or just chat it up with us, you can always find us at www.highdbudtenders.com. We answer all of our email.
Awesome. And I can attest, we reached out to Rocky. She got back to us in a timely manner. So definitely go down in the links below and give her a follow and check out the High Budtenders podcast. And if you're watching this on YouTube, go down there and smash that like button for Rocky. Leave a comment. What'd you think about her story in Target? I got a retail story. It's not as good, but also, if you're watching this on YouTube, you got to go down there and subscribe, because you would miss amazing interviews and guests like Rocky. So make sure you subscribe to Dro TV. And that's it for today. Thank you for tuning in. And as always, smoke them if you got them. What's up, Dro TV family? You can now stream the audio version of all these episodes on your favorite podcast player. And if you like more episodes like this, check out this playlist we put together over here for you. And if you haven't already, subscribe to us on YouTube. You don't want to miss more great content from Dro TV. Thank you for tuning in, and as always, smoke them if you got them.